Okay, class, welcome to our third theme lecture. So it's very important for you to have gone through our two themes, which covered medical anthropology, the introduction to medical anthropology, which is our theme one, where the relevance of medical anthropology has been explained, where contributions of medical anthropology have been explained, where challenges and resolutions by medical anthropologists have been expressed as well in the modern world, looking at the historical factors, historical dynamics, and historical issues that have shaped the role and the continuous contribution of medical anthropology. Okay, our second theme, we covered epidemiologists. So we covered the first, the second, and the third epidemiological transition, which we learned about the evolution of human, where the evolution tells us the trades-off of human civilization, of human progress, as we call it, of human rationalization to those who do sociology. So you need to understand that in as much as we have covered what is medical anthropology, we have covered the epidemiological transition, but we still have one aspect of medical anthropology to cover, which is its interdisciplinary shape, its transdisciplinary aspect. Okay, so what you need to know is in the next lectures, Dr. Nzuza will be taking over, which it will be her just finishing off the last three sections. So I wish for you to understand that today we will cover the relationship between anthropologists and epidemiologists. Okay, okay. Okay, let me share. Okay, this is our focus today. Our focus is specifically on this aspect, the relationship between anthropologists and epidemiologists. I said to you today, we are going to be making it clear that there is a relationship that exists, the transdisciplinary relationship, the interdisciplinary relationship that exists between anthropologists and epidemiologists. So the learning outcome will be you will understand the collaborative efforts between these area of specialization in research. That is how we came up with the transdisciplinary approach, interdisciplinary approaches, because medical anthropology does not only end in its course, which is social science, but it extends to other aspects. It extends to explaining the scientific together with the social aspect. So you will be able to understand how this interdisciplinary relationship comes about, how this interdisciplinary relationship emerges. Okay, students will be exposed to research vocabulary. Yes, you will understand research vocabulary, qualitative, quantitative, ethnography as part of this section, because if you don't understand what is ethnography, then you wouldn't understand the emic and ethic perspective, which anthropologists are interested in. That is finding the insider view perspective. That is not only understanding a phenomenon from a distance, but also understanding it internally, Students will be empowered to understand anthropologists and epidemiologists. how they converge to do research. You'll understand the significance of research, the role of research, the contributions of research. Students will also be empowered to understand the methodological limitations, because in each discipline, in as much as they are able to research something and find things out, there are also limitations to that. Whilst qualitative can be good for many social sciences, it can be criticized within the scope of quantitative, within the scope of natural sciences, because both natural scientists and social scientists do research differently. But there is a good potential if the two fields come together to engage in research. So what you need to understand about this section is that it will highlight the transdisciplinary or the interdisciplinary context of medical anthropology. Okay, you will understand, you need to understand what is research, because understanding what is research, you will find, or you'll understand the purpose of research. Over the years, research has been done in a variety of areas. Human science, it has done in natural sciences. It has been done to understand why people live in rural areas, why some people stay in urban areas, and why many people are moving to urban areas. It has also been made to understand what causes the movement of people. Extending to population, it has been able to understand why the population is increasing, what are the platforms, what are the solutions to that. So research is basically a broader field, and each discipline engages in research because they have a particular role to play when it comes to uncovering and coming up with resolutions. So what is research? It becomes a scientific or non-scientific field. It is important to understand that it becomes a process, a systematic process of using different methods, asking questions, taking answers from interviews, giving out surveys, giving out many, maybe consent forms. So it becomes a wide space. So between the epidemiologists and anthropologists, which is the natural scientists and the social scientists, the relationship comes in research, as they all engage in variety of research in their area. Okay, so what you need to understand is it becomes a practical process, practically, because you need to go there, you need to talk to people, you need to use different platforms to make sure that you need to cover different platforms, different locations, different populations, in order for you to come up with answers. So the relationship between the natural sciences and the social sciences, the biological and the cultural, the epidemiologist and the anthropologist emerges in research. Okay, research is about acquiring knowledge and developing understanding. So if something is not understood, research has to be done. Experts have to engage in research. They need to do more research in order for that phenomenon to be understood. For example, initially, epidemiologists said COVID-19 came through touching each other, which was something new, which we did not go against that. People stayed away from each other. Over time, they said COVID-19 actually comes through air particulates, which means it can come through the air. It can come through the air. So you need to know that in as much as that has been changed, it is because of research. They did more research. They engage in research in order for them to come up with better outcomes, to come up with better facts. So today, the relationship between anthropologists and epidemiologists will be shared through research, because they work together to understand issues of illness and disease. They transdisciplinary work together to understand this phenomenon. And I explained to some of the students who I was speaking to who questioned the issue of an essay. I said the theme 1, 2, 3 are important. They are equally important because each one contributes to you explaining medical anthropologists. And the third theme, which is this one, simply answers the transdisciplinary aspect, the interdisciplinary aspect. It shares the dynamics of that transdisciplinary nature of medical anthropology, which means through this section, you'll be able to explain this collaborative effort to answer issues of illness and disease. So you can use theme 1, 2, and 3, because here we are going into the transdisciplinary nature or the interdisciplinary characteristics or character of this particular medical anthropology field. Okay, we need to understand what is epidemiology. So it is the study of disease. As I've explained, they study disease. They understand disease from the biological point of view. They engage in laboratory testing. They use different methods, deductive methods, inductive methods to understand disease. And they understand the causal factors as well. Through that, they are able to understand also the genetic makeup of a particular virus or a disease, working with virologists, working with anthropologists. The measures that need to be taken, they also understand. So they understand the measures, they understand the causal factors, and therefore they understand the disease itself, which means they are able to also track and define the modes of transmission, patterns of disease, how it goes about, how it's transmitted from one person to the other. Okay, the aim for epidemiologists is to determine risk factors of transmission, risk factors of how it causes, or how a particular environment causes a disease, because they are interested in that scope, the ecological aspects and the biological aspects, to understand a particular disease. So ultimately aimed to change and modify the risk factors. Yes, they are able to change and modify risk factors, which means they're able to explain the measures that need to be taken in order for a particular pandemic to be reduced, to be combated, or to be ended, or any way that it could be handled. So they are able to devise measures that could help directly to alleviate a particular illness. Testing of procedures, they are able to test. I said laboratory in the beginning, they use laboratory. They use qualitative methods. Remember, for you to understand research, you need to understand the difference between qualitative and quantitative, which qualitative predominantly engages in numbers. It explains the use of statistics, the use of tables, pie charts, pie graphs to explain a particular phenomenon. So you are able to not use words, but use numbers. So it becomes the dominant method in the natural sciences. So the natural science loves qualitative. They usually use a qualitative method with its statistical data and measurable data, which they use mathematics to resolve or come up with answers to a particular problem. Okay, whilst the anthropologists take a different approach, I explained that the approach that they're taking, they become a holistic study. It means they do not only understand the humanistic side, but they try to understand the linkages to that humanistic aspect, the cultural forms, the behavioral aspects, the traditional elements that contribute to a particular illness. So they do not just look at the illness, but they look at many dynamics, social dynamics, cultural dynamics of illness. Medical anthropology uses this as its basis for the study of disease. Yes, it uses this as its basis for the study of disease. So they use the society to understand a particular disease. Understanding a particular group will give them answers to how a particular disease is developed through looking at the cultural aspect, which links to behavior of people, how they behave. I remember last week I linked culture to food, because food we learn, we pass on. Many families pass on menus, how they cook, what they eat, which contributes to cultural elements, which then can potentially give answers to issues of illness and disease. They use qualitative, not quantitative, which qualitative is dominantly or predominantly the use of words, the use of expressions, the use of interpersonal interaction between you and the group, which that interpersonal interaction can develop through the use of interviews, focus groups, ethnographic methods, participant observation. So it becomes you using a variety of available methods. You can interview people as part of qualitative. You can use focus groups as part of qualitative. You can use many methods that are part of qualitative methods. As people express themselves, you can also write that, because with qualitative, it becomes a flexible method of research, because you are not only looking at what they are saying, but you are also looking at how they are behaving, how their body gesture turns and changes as they answer particular questions. So it does not only become an emic process, but also an ethic process. It becomes you becoming an insider person, understanding the insider knowledge of that particular group, engaging with them, gaining trust, interacting with them would then give you a total information, which is part of your research, going back to research at the bottom. Okay. Okay, students. Looking at how these two disciplines go about inquiring information, yes, that the epidemiologist and the medical anthropologist work together to acquire information through research, in as much as epidemiologists use quantitative methods, medical anthropologists use qualitative methods. So in order for these numbers that are used by quantitative researchers, which are epidemiologists, which form part of natural sciences field, then anthropologists, medical anthropologists are able to make sense of this information through the use of qualitative methods, use of expressions, interpretive ability, the ability to interpret numbers. For example, if I'm doing research or on a particular vaccination research, I will ask questions. If total of 10 people said they haven't vaccinated, 4 out of 10 said they haven't vaccinated, then 6 have vaccinated, which means we have more than 50% of people who have vaccinated. Qualitatively, it means that more and more people will vaccinate. More and more people are becoming vaccinated. Okay. When Western perspective is strictly scientific and natural, it involves factual measurements, which are measurable information. This information is measurable. It becomes a qualitative information and a quantitative information, which can be interpreted into simple answers or response or findings, because most people wouldn't expect or wouldn't be expected to read numbers. So the qualitative side, which is the use of expressions, words, and interaction, has the ability to produce and make sure that the two fields are able to come up with answers. Epidemiology, in quantitative in nature, yes, epidemiologists are quantitative in nature. They use statistical data, measurable data, whilst anthropologists are qualitative, which means they holistically rely on words, interaction, and the collection of narratives. If I talk about the collection of narratives, I talk about the collection of people's views, ideas, and understandings of a particular illness. Okay, problems for anthropologists. In as much as each field has been able to come up with resolutions to particular illness and disease and answers to particular problems of unwellness, but they have limitations, and those limitations contribute to their continuous growth. I mean, their continuous growth, because these fields are growing. Their growth depends on more research and more and more field work to be done. Okay, anthropologists try to understand the inner world of people, communities, and cultures in terms of disease. Yes, they try to understand people, communities, and cultures in terms of disease, which is a limitation, because for you to understand these phenomena, you have to use also the parts or the role of epidemiologist, which centered on or is centered on understanding the actual disease. So their limitation is being criticized to be on their singulated focus or binary focus. I mean singular focus, because once I talk about the binary focus, I'm now talking about the epidemiological role, which is the epidemiologist, and the anthropologist role. Look at values and perceptions and beliefs. Yes, they look at only values and perceptions and beliefs, which means history, ecology, and culture for them are connected. They called the emic approach inside the perspective. Remember, I said qualitative is good because it's flexible. It does not only tell us about the emic, which is only about the inside aspects or what we've received when we ask questions, but also the ethic, which we can also view from outside. Because when you're researching people, you have to ask questions, but also you have to expect to observe them, because you might not get all the answers through asking questions only, but also you can also get more answers through observations, because observations can also give you more perspective. Okay, problems for epidemiologists. Look for the cause of disease. They look for the cause of disease. So they need each other, the two fields, because in as much as this field looks at the cause of disease, cancer, smoking, and as an example, but the limitations of qualitative absence affects them, because they require information in as much as they might use these numbers, but the simple interpretation is always required from a research, because someone who's sitting at home will need to understand what is happening, how is or how are things like this. Okay, once this is obtained, it will apply universally. Sources of information become sources of information, and they get information and apply it universally. For anthropologists, the field is most important, which the field of research. Participant observation, which I spoke about, interviews and oral history, all form parts of that. For them, these are not important. They do not use this. So the collaborative efforts become stronger, because observations, interpretations, interviews, and oral history can be obtained through ethnography. And the use of ethnography is predominantly the method of anthropology. Okay, they can use different interviews, open-ended questions used to find out answers. Use surveys, questionnaires. Yes, they use surveys and questionnaire, the epidemiologists, because the qualitative another difference between qualitative and quantitative is because quantitative can be done at a countrywide scale, which means you need forms to give to people through surveys, through questionnaires, and then you collect them. Then you can deduct, make tables, interpret that information. Whilst qualitative can be formed in a smaller scale, and then maybe the results can be compared to the entire population. But with the qualitative, since it requires interviews, you cannot interview the rest of South Africa. It's totally impossible for you to research the rest of South Africa. Whilst with the quantitative, which is used by, okay, Zink, yes, I'm listening.
So I wanted to ask, does this apply when we're speaking about the current pandemic, when we're referring to COVID-19, how they get like the numbers of people that are infected and how many have died from the virus? And
yes, that's part of quantitative, becomes a statistical data, information that is obtained through information that came through computer systems, came through the hospitals, came through clinics. So it becomes them as epidemiologists collecting that information and quantitatively interpreting it, giving us statistics of illness, number of people who died. And through that, they are also able to take measures and be able to come up with solutions to a particular problem. That is why we had lockdowns. It was the epidemiologist solutions to just make sure you separate the people in order for this virus to not continue, because this virus came through interaction, came through air, which means people in confined spaces in large numbers are most likely to be infected, which then it's the measure that they need to take. Removing people, reducing people, wearing masks was all part of that. So the surveys were also used and the questionnaires were used to some stage because there were other social elements pertaining to COVID, such as the poverty element, the hunger that is causing people to want to go out. So there are many factors that are linked to people getting sick, because you might say people must stay at home, but what are they going to eat? So you must continuously develop your solutions, quantitatively collect information until the solution is reached. So over the past 2 years, epidemiologists have worked overtime to detain the crisis. Okay, when it comes to analysis of information, for anthropologists, they deal with explaining information, as I've explained to you, because the epidemiologists, they use quantitative information. Quantitative comes in numbers, comes in statistics, and comes in different modes, but it does not come in words. So it's where medical anthropologists are able to channel this information, explaining the phenomenon, explaining the interpretive nature, and come up with the social, the cultural, the humanistic elements that cause a particular illness. Okay, they look at means, at meanings attached to a particular illness. Look for commonalities of thinking, behavior, and interpretation. So for epidemiologists, they look at numbers, they look at people in terms of numbers. They look at this illness in terms of numbers. They look at risk factors, high risk factors, low risk factors, medium risk factors. So as I've mentioned, they had to separate people, reduce people in confined spaces, send the country to lockdown, because once you understand a particular illness, it's easier for you to come up with the humanistic interpretation, the cultural transmission, to come up with solutions to a particular illness and measures that need to be taken to detain a particular illness. Combining anthropology and epidemiology. Okay, I said to you, this section is about explaining this collaborative effort, which shines the quantitative and the quantitative side, which shines the cultural and the biological side, which shines the humanistic and the scientific side, because the two need each other. For a long time, which is still happening in South Africa. You'll find natural science students doing their own thing and us here and social science doing our own thing, which is a problem because many times I've had people from the other side doing masters and PhDs struggling to interpret data because of social science abilities. I am able to help them answer their or interpret their data, because once the data is in numbers, you need to simplify it, turn it into words, into something people can understand, so that decision makers will be able to take decisions based on that research, not on numbers, but on research outcomes, which are in words. Okay, anthropologists say that epidemiologists ignore the context. Yes, they ignore the context. They ignore the context. Okay, anthropologists say epidemiologists ignore the context. They ignore the context of illness. They deal with the actual illness, because if you don't understand the context of illness, the illness will continue because you don't know how it is transmitted socially, which cultural elements contributes to that illness. So over the years, HIV solutions have come out successfully. This is because they were able to understand the cultural and the economic causes of illness, of HIV transmission, looking at the cultural aspect, understanding African culture, looking at, again, polygamy as a problem of culture, looking at other elements such as a female genital mutilation. Again, female genital mutilation is a culture from North Africa where females' genitals, their clitoris, are cut and stitched. They are stitched because men want women to, according to them, they say women will behave better. They would not sleep around. They would not have issues when it comes to cheating. So that's a cultural problem, because how now is HIV transmitted? They use same equipment for every woman, which is not sanitary. They also endanger women, because if they do that to women, it gives them more choices. It gives them more pleasure as men as opposed to women. And through those cuts, women are able to get HIV transmission because they are being cut with the same equipment that has been cutting every woman that came here. Two, the issue of polygamy, which I've explained before, comes as a problem to HIV because men sleep around. It's not guaranteed that men will stop sleeping with more women once they get another wife. It might not guarantee that, which means for women to have less options and less choices when it comes to relationship, it becomes a cultural cause of HIV, because through polygamy, people say they follow culture. Through the same female genital mutilation, people will say they are following culture. So what you need to understand between the two cultures I just mentioned is that they promote men pleasure. They only promote pleasure to men. Okay, please go check female genital mutilation on YouTube. You will understand it. As you go along with anthropology, you will understand it more, because there are sections, I think third year level or honors, if those would reach that level, because most of you still need to know about it. Excuse me. Okay. The collaboration determines risk factors, which leads to spread of disease. Their collaboration leads to the understanding of risk factors, which leads to the understanding of the spread of disease, because understanding risk factors will mean you'll be able to combat, limit, and make sure that you deal with a particular illness. Epidemiologist, on the other hand, wants to look at facts in terms of figures, as I've explained, quantitative, cause effects, blood, that is HIV comes through the blood. through the research, collaborative research or laboratory research, let me not say collaborative research, through laboratory research, through scientific research, they were able to understand the cause and effect of HIV. Anthropology wants to understand the context of disease. So the context comes through understanding the dynamics of culture, as I've explained to you before. I think I'm repeating the same thing now. Okay, barriers to this particular collaboration. Biomedical anthropologists, as how it happens there, don't take context into account. Biomedical don't take context into account, which means biomedical focuses on the scientific side. It focuses on the laboratory side. It focuses on the cause and the effects of a particular illness. Okay. They want to measure things that can be seen. Context can be seen. Yes, they want to measure things that can be seen, which means you can measure the number of people who are sick, such through testing them, through them coming to the hospital, through different modes. Okay, anthropological studies take too long. Anthropological studies take too long, can't afford to keep anthropology for long periods. Yes, they take too long because ethnography cannot take a week, can take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, because it takes a long time to understand people. Because through ethnography, you are able to go to the field, you are able to answer questions, you are able to observe the community, you are able to cross-examine your answers, and you are able to do both the emic and the ethic perspective, which is getting the insider knowledge and also observing it from a distance, understanding their social environment, social cultural aspects, social political elements. Londi, I'm listening. Yes, Londi. Londi. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have a question here.
Yes.
What can I do to accomplish anthropology, sir?
Okay. In what context? Please explain.
I think, sir, Hello, sir.
Yes, to accomplish in a way to how to do it further.
Like to master it, sir.
You need to do
like strategies.
Okay, you need to study more. Go through your readings. Make sure
That's all.
Go through your readings. See videos on YouTube.
Okay, no problem, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So barriers on the collaborative efforts as well. These are barriers that inhibit or limit the role of the two fields. So it causes problems for research. So it's one of the limitations of this collaborative effort. It's the inhibitors of their collaborative effort. It's the things that affect or impact negatively their collaboration. So they need quick fix solution, mass vaccination. These are part of epidemiological solutions. So they come up with those tangible solutions to help with illness. They come up with tangible solutions to help with issues of illness. So understand these barriers, because understanding these barriers will also add to you on if you decide to add the criticism of medical anthropology on your essay, maybe say fourth paragraph, you say criticism of medical anthropologists, you can put them there. saying anthropology takes a long time because they used ethnography. Ethnography takes a long time. The use of ethnography requires a researcher to go to that place. If it's in Nigeria or Egypt, you need to go to Egypt. Stay there in a community you've never been in. Stay with people you don't know. Understand the language you've never heard of. Eat the food you've never ate. Stay with people we never stayed with for perhaps 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That is how they are able to understand this disease, which is a problem for epidemiologists because they use biomedical approach, which biomedical approach is different from the ethnomedical approach, which medical anthropologists also incorporate in their research. Which is part of our approaches. We've studied that before. So if you don't understand that, you need to go back to our notes where I talk about the approaches. Okay. Yeah. Case study. This case study now tries to show you the role, the collaborative, or the historical efforts between epidemiologists and anthropologists, which happened in KwaZulu-Natal. It was a famous project for KZN. It showed the collaborative efforts between doctors and social scientists, between the natural scientists and humanistic scientists, between the cultural and the biological fields, the transdisciplinary field, the interdisciplinary relationship. If I talk about inter or trans, it means I'm crossing over to the next space, which is the binding of the two, the connection between two fields. In this case, the transdisciplinary emerges because of the natural sciences and the social sciences. Okay. Okay, Sydney and Emilia, medical doctors, had anthropological background, which is an advantage because having an anthropological background within the field of medical natural science, you will have an advantage for interpretations, the skills, the ability to understand the social, the cultural aspects, the biocultural aspects of illness you will have, because you will not only use the quantitative side, but you will use the qualitative side. You will not only understand the social side, but you will also understand the natural science side. With you having both abilities, it will give you a stronger chance of being able to understand the phenomena from both sides. Okay, they hired other anthropologists to help. You cannot work as an individual in such cases because, as I've mentioned, if it is an epidemiological research, it requires quantitative research, which means they will take surveys and questionnaires to give to 20 million people and then collect the 20 million scripts. Collecting them will need people, and then starting to interpret them will need both fields. Both fields to collaborate equally. They go out and interview people from community. Yes, they go out to the field. Field work, as it has been mentioned here, field work here, field work, which is a huge part of qualitative research. Through field work, you are able to use a qualitative method of interviewing people. Through interviewing people, you get your answers, and then you are able to understand and dwell on social and cultural behavior and health needs of those particular individuals. You do disease profile, looking at the belief system, ecology, and history of the community. That is interdisciplinary approach, cultural, biological, humanistic, scientific, qualitative, quantitative. It becomes a relationship. It becomes a symbiotic relationship, a smooth relationship. Okay. Okay, this information was important for building of a clinic in the area. Yes, Remember, I said to you, the beginning of medical anthropology was to contribute to healthcare system, This contribution to healthcare system means the improvement of healthcare, improving the access to healthcare, improving the accessibility of healthcare, removing the stratifications in healthcare, the limitations, the hierarchy in healthcare. So the information was useful in building a clinic in the area. This area has had no clinic, which was a problem because without a clinic, people get ill. And for them to have to travel long distance, it might be detrimental to their health, which the role of anthropologists and epidemiologists becomes vital. Once information was gathered, the clinic was set up to cater for the needs of a particular community. Yes, through them, understand the cultural, the social aspects, scientific and natural, they're able to gather information, biocultural information, socio-cultural information, which will contribute to the needs of the community. That is building a clinic from facts, from the study, from the research that has been done through going to the field, and qualitatively collecting information and interpreting information, and then come up with solutions where the clinic was built. Okay, many people from overseas came to do the internship at this clinic. It became well known. Yes, many people from overseas came. And you see how the role of anthropology and medical anthropology can help a simple community, a simple impoverished community, because most rich communities, most communities with people who have money do not suffer from such resource limitations. They do not suffer from such resource limitations. These resource limitations form part of social and cultural behavior because people would not seek health. Them not seeking health means they are not getting tested. Not getting tested, it means more people will get sick, either from HIV or any other illness. Let's say there is a water source that is toxic, people are drinking water, they are getting sick. So without having facilities such as clinics, having research such as this being done in isolated areas, remote areas, such as many rural KZN, then it would become a problem because solutions would not be generated. In 1944, a report was put out called a Clarkman report. This report documented the collaboration between epidemiologists and anthropologists in this setting of a clinic, making sure they set clinic. So they set up 40 clinics which were built in rural areas. You see, from simple research to findings which contribute to decisions to build clinics, you see how the roles of epidemiologists and anthropologists can contribute to solutions or contribute to the needs of the communities. That is the beautiful nature of the collaborative effort. It was recommended that the method used in Polela projects be used elsewhere. Yes, used in Polela projects, used elsewhere. So this project is a clear demonstration. It is a case study that demonstrates directly the role of anthropology in collaboration with epidemiology, the transdisciplinary nature or the transdisciplinary advantage, the power that comes with using two fields to come up with clinical solutions, to come up with social solutions to a particular illness. Okay, however, there were political issues around this. Remember, this was 1948 in the depth, the beginning of apartheid, where apartheid began, where it was engineered. So there were many social limitations, especially with hiring of particular color, of people of color, Indians, coloreds, and blacks. So it was that issue because the country was still segregated. In 1948, government said no money, closed down the clinics, or sized down. So the clinics were closed down or sized down. So that is how the problems for those particular communities came about. I think this was 1950. Okay, 1948, the creation, as I've mentioned, the creation of apartheid came about. Everywhere became separated. Clinics were closed down. Clinics were closed down. And those who came from the US went back to the US. They attempted to use the same method in the US. They opened the first department of epidemiology with anthropologists at the university. I think at Harvard University. I'm still going to search. I'm not sure, but I'm still going to check for you. They made the university famous. When people talk about medical anthropology, they refer to the university, Harvard. As a result of this collaboration that happened in KZN. So students, the collaborative effort uses quantitative and qualitative. It uses the scientific and the humanistic, which means the scientific goes with the quantitative, which are numbers, whilst the cultural and the humanistic goes with what we can call the qualitative, which words, expressions. So becomes that. So I think for this theme, we are done. Just understand that on Thursday, we will talk about the assignment, but we'll start by revising this section. We will start by revising this important section. So if you have questions, you can raise your hand. Any questions? Okay, so on Thursday, we will deal with the revision, which we will be talking about questions on the assignment. I will explain the structure that I expect from you. And then I think from there, we can then say that we are ready for the assignment. But we gave you the assignment earlier because we don't want to extend it, which means we were supposed to give you the assignment on the 28th, but we decided to give you the assignment earlier. So for you to pass this assignment, you will need to do your part. So if you bring your assignment for checking or something, it's up to you. I will point you out the areas that need to be fixed. But on Thursday, I will thoroughly, properly explain the assignment. Okay, bye. Thank you.